Hello and welcome to a new updated version of my Herbal glycerite video. Now if you've watched that video you'll note that there are lots of comments and I've had lots of questions on herbal glycerites and how you make them. So this is an update. There are actually several different methods that you can use to make a glycerite, and that's going to depend on what herb that you're going to use. So the first method is a decocted method, and that's the one that's in the original video. And really simply, you take your herb, and this is calendula today, and this is dried calendula petals. I would cover this with water, decoct it for say 30 minutes to an hour, and then I would strain that, and then I would add my vegetable glycerin, 70% glycerin to 30% of the decoction. Now this is still, because it's got water in it, is still not going to be that stable. The glycerin will be preserving it, yes, and also it helps it taste better if you're going to be using particularly bitter herbs, for example, and that's why herbal glycerites are often given to children, because they are sweet tasting. But this, because we've got 30% water in it, it is going to be unstable. You may want to keep it in the fridge. They can last up to 6 months, but you do need to be mindful of mould. If you want to prevent mould, I would recommend adding in some alcohol, something over 20% alcohol, and you'll need to add in 5% of your total. So if you were making 100 ml of your glycerite, then it would be 5 ml of the alcohol that you would be adding in as the preservative. Now you don't have to do that, but if you want it to last longer, that's how you can do that. Now if I was doing this with a fresh herb, obviously the fresh herb is going to have a lot more water in it. So if I was using a fresh herb, I probably wouldn't use the decoction method, because I'm just adding additional water, which will mean that my original herbal glycerite is going to be weaker, because I haven't got as much of the herbal constituents in it, because I've got a lot more water in it. So if I'm using a fresh plant, then I would just steep it in the glycerite itself. So this would be an infused glycerite. So what we would do is we would just pop it in a jar like so, and then cover this with the glycerin. And now you can do this with dried herbs and you can do this with fresh herbs, but this is the better method if you're using a fresh herb. So cover it in glycerin. It is going to float, don't be too worried about that. You can weigh it down with things like the same way that people do with fermenting, so you can use little fermenting pebbles. You could use like a ramekin. People use sealed bags of water that they can use to pop in the top to weigh it down. So those are few methods that you can do to weigh it down. But if you are using quite a lot of plant material, you don't need to worry too much. Obviously do be mindful that the top isn't going mouldy and it's not going discoloured or anything. Now we would leave this in exactly the same way that we would make a tincture, so you can leave this from 2 weeks to a month. If we were just adding the glycerin, we've got the herb in there, and we're closing it up, and we're just going to leave it to do its own thing. We don't need to do anything with it, and then it will be extracting those herbal constituents into the glycerin. So we'll be making a herbal glycerite. Now this will be what's called an infused glycerite. Okay, so this is a decocted, and this is an infused glycerite. Now an infused glycerite, because it has less water in it usually, it is going to last that much longer. So it does have a slightly longer shelf life, and you don't tend to need to keep it in the fridge as much, unless you're using a plant and you're using a fresh plant and you've extracted a lot of water from that fresh plant. For example, lemon balm would be an example of that. Do be mindful of the amount of water that is going to be in your glycerite. Again, you can add in the 5% alcohol as a preservative. If you don't want to use alcohol, or you can't use alcohol, then I would recommend keeping it in the fridge. And then again, this is going to have a 6 month to 12 month best before date on it. So because we've got less water in it, and if you're adding the preservative, it is going to be lasting longer. But yes, I would say 6 months, at least 6 months, and then 6 months to a year if it's not got too much water in it, and if you've got your alcohol in it, which is stabilising it and not allowing mould to grow. So that's the infused method. Now, a version of the infused method, which I really like and I use a lot, is using a slow cooker. Now, what some people do is they take their herb and they fill it in the slow cooker, and then they add in the glycerin on top of that, and they use the actual slow cooker dish to make the glycerite. Now, you can do that, but what I find is, one, it's horrible to have to clean, and you tend to find that the temperatures, that even on the lowest setting, your slow cooker is going to be too hot. It's going to be starting to burn your herb material, which you don't want, because it's coming into direct contact with this what is going to be a hot dish. So a way to make it cleaner and and make you not have this direct contact is if we fill it in our jar, and we would put a lid or a cover over it just to stop water going in it. Pop it in like this. You can put a couple in there, and then fill this up to about halfway with water, and that's going to protect, because the hot water it's basically a hot water bath of what you've created, and that's going to protect the herb from getting too hot. And you can leave this in your slow cooker with your water in it on the lowest setting overnight. And that's a really lovely way to extract your herbal glycerite. One, it's quick. Two, you get a lot of extraction when you start to apply a gentle heat to it. We're still using the infused method. We've not added any water into our jar, so we're just adding glycerin to the jar. So we don't have any issues with it being less stable. So once we've done our extraction the next day, and the best thing to do when you want to strain an infused glycerite is you need it to be liquid. So once it's warm, not hot, now you'll be able to put that through a sieve, and you'll have a herbal glycerite, and there won't be any bits in it. And it will even go through a reasonable muslin cloth if you want to have less bits in it, but I would just do a couple of goes through a sieve is your better option with a glycerite. But you would need to do it when it's warm, otherwise you won't get it out of the jar. So if you're doing the month-long method, the infused method, which will obviously be cold, to get this out of the jar, the best thing to do is to just pop this in basically a pan of warm water, and just allow it to gently warm through, and then once the glycerin is sort of very gradually warm, you can then again put that through a sieve. So those are the best ways. So this is my favourite way, is this cold infused, if you like, it was cold glycerite that we put in there. Then we've basically put it in a water bath, and we put it in there overnight, and then you can easily strain it. One, it's less messy. Two, it's nice and protected. Three, you get a really nice extraction. And four, you don't have the issues with additional water going in there, so you're going to get a much longer and stable herbal product that you can use afterwards. So really is my favourite method, and if you do take part in any of my herbal study groups or any of my courses, you will come across this method, because it really is a favourite of mine, and it's the one that I recommend to people who, if you're taking part in a study group and you need to suddenly make a herbal glycerite by the next day, then it's really easy to be able to do this. Now, if you don't have a slow cooker, don't worry, you can do the same thing in a saucepan, just a bigger saucepan or a smaller jar, and again, just do it like a water bath. Just do it really, really gentle with the heat, and so you can do it on a stovetop in that way. Obviously, you wouldn't leave that overnight. You would maybe do it through the day and just keep an eye on it, and it, you don't need to do it for a longer period of time. This is just the cheats way, if you already have a slow cooker, to do it that way. So, okay. So I just wanted to go over a couple of questions that people asked. The first one is, can you use powdered herbs, or do the herbs have to be powdered before you can make them into a glycerite? Okay, so no, they don't have to be powdered before you make them into a glycerite. You can use anything. So whether you've got a root or a berry or a seed, whatever it is that you are making, or even a combination of herbs, that you don't need to do them singly. You could do them in a group together. If you were making, for example, a winter health glycerite, you could put all of your different berries and seeds and roots and whatever it is you wanted to make, and put it into your jar, or whichever method you were going to use, and then just add your glycerin. So you don't need to powder it. But if you do happen to have some powdered herb of something, and you thought, I want to use this up and I want to make a glycerite with it, that's absolutely fine. You can use any of these methods, and it's exactly the same. It's just, it will be slightly more difficult to get it through a sieve, possibly. You probably will need to use a muslin cloth because of the bits. So it is possible, slightly messier on straining, but if you've got some powdered herb and you want to make it into a glycerite, that's absolutely fine. So storage, we've already talked about, and making it more stable. So the other question, and I've already talked about how you strain it out, because that's the thing that a lot of people have struggled with, is basically the glycerin gets cold, and it clumps up into the herb, and then you can't get it out. So the best thing to do is to warm it through and then strain it. And then of course it will then, it won't solidify, but it will be thicker in your jar or container. So, and another question that people have is, how do you know that you've extracted what you need to extract? Well, this is home extraction, so we're not really going to be doing any sorts of laboratory tests or anything to see how many constituents and what constituents are within our herbal products. This is for home use. So really, to be able to tell, it's going to have a smell, and that'll be your essential oils that I've extracted, and it will be a different colour. This is one that you can see. So vegetable glycerin is clear, and you can see this is sort of a golden, slightly greeny colour. This is actually bay leaf glycerite, as an example. So you will get the colour change. It's going to have a different smell. So those are really and obviously when you taste it, it should have a different taste, that you have extracted basically herbal constituents. If you want to go into more depth of what you're extracting and how to extract it in different ways, you would really need to go into a more in-depth course, and that isn't something that I can really cover in these types of videos, because it's we would need to go into a lot more biochemistry and phytochemistry and things. I think that's everything, all of the questions. So the main thing is, just to recap, you've got your decocted method, which you're adding water in, You then are going to be doing 70% glycerin to 30% decoction. That is pretty unstable. I recommend keeping it in the fridge. 6 months is the amount of time that you've got with that one. If you're doing your cold infusion, it's 2 to 4 weeks. You can just do it like this. You can weigh it down in the top and just leave it. Warm it slightly when you come to strain it. It's going to be more stable if you've used dried herb because there isn't very much water in it. And so it's going to have a much longer shelf life. You can keep it not in the fridge and you've got 6 to 12 months. Remember, if you want to add that preservative, I recommend 5% alcohol. If you want to do an overnight, you can do an overnight infused glycerite if you've got a slow cooker, or you can do it in a pan. Just add your herb, cover your glycerin inside your jar, put a lid on it, but don't put it on tight because you might get some some air and some gas is going to move around as it's heating up. So you just want to put it on to cover it and protect it, but not screw it on tight. Leave it overnight, strain it while warm, and you can bottle it. And again, you've got it's going to be 6 to 12 months. It's going to be more stable unless you've used a fresh herb and you've got more water in there, and then you might want to add your alcohol as a preservative. So the other question I've just remembered is dosage. Now, again, this is home use. This is not professional. This is not, you're not making it as a herbal practitioner. So your dosage is really going to be quite standard in that it would be the same as what you would give as a tincture of that same herb. And it's usually 5 to 10 mils per day for whatever it is that you're using. For example, if you were making the winter remedy for cold and flu type glycerite, then you would be taking maybe 5 mils a day as a preventative. That's the type of amount. So it's usually 5 to 10 mil for an adult, and it would be half that for a child. Okay, if you have any questions, do leave them in the comments, and do feel free to see my original video for lots of questions that people have asked on there. And don't feel free to ask the questions, and I'll answer them as best I can. Hopefully that has answered as many questions as I've had, but feel free to ask more, and don't forget to subscribe.